This is the cover of the phone book. I'm just going to show you a few pictures just to get you an idea of what's in it. This picture I made at Mike's Papaya down on Church and Chambers. And they're all made with the iPhone. They're all made with the Hipstamatic app. And originally, I started shooting with the Hipstamatic and the iPhone because I'll get to a photo in a minute and start the story there. Here we go. This picture. I originally started with the iPhone because I was on vacation in Johannesburg, and the first couple of days I was there, I wasn't really comfortable taking out at the time, a Nikon D700 and going out on shooting on the streets. So I said, well, I'll try out my iPhone. And honestly, I always wanted to shoot squares, and I was getting really tired of rectangles. And at the time, Hipstamatic was the only app that shot squares. It was way before Instagram. It was 2010 or 2009. And I went out for a couple of days in the neighborhood near the hotel, and I got a couple of pictures that I really liked. And let me tell you, it was a really different experience back then because the processor in the iPhone was really slow, and the Hipstamatic itself was a really slow app. And in a way, that's why I was interested in it, because I shot my first book, The New Yorkers, in the 80s on Kodachrome, on still film, without a motor drive and one lens. And when I started using the iPhone with Hipstamatic, it was really slow. It was basically a wide-angle lens that you didn't zoom, and you had to really hold still to make the thing sharp. And it reminded me of being an analog photographer, and there was something about it intuitively that felt right to me. And I had just graduated from graduate school at SVA, Masters in Digital Photography program, and I'd been shooting with a Nikon D700 for a whole year. And honestly, I was sick of it. I was sick of holding a big camera up to my eye and saying, here I am taking a picture, And the iPhone was a great alternative to that. And I just kept working on it. After Johannesburg, I traveled a lot. I was in New York a lot shooting. And it just felt right to me, even though the world at the time was telling me this is a really dumb idea. In 2009, nobody thought that the iPhone and the Hipstamatic was a valid form of expression. But I made this picture on the second floor across from Penn Station. And basically what I'm saying about what the difference in the atmosphere in 2010 is I think the first time that anybody ever, a journalist really had some notice about taking pictures with the iPhone and Hipstamatic was Damon Winter did pictures of soldiers in Afghanistan when they were at rest. And they were published on the front page of the New York Times. And he got a lot of crap from people that this isn't art, this isn't journalism. And he wrote a wonderful essay, you can look it up on Google, about why the iPhone is a valid camera and the Hipstamatic is a valid app. And the reason he says that it was valid is because the soldiers were so much more relaxed when they were shooting with the iPhone than when they were shooting with a big fancy camera. And what he was looking for was authenticity. And that's something that I'm very interested in, and that's why I like shooting street photography, because if you don't get in the middle of the shot and you just let people do what they do and you're a witness to it, you get at least the appearance of authenticity. And I'm not stepping into the middle and talking to the people first. I take the picture. If they get mad, they can talk to me later and tell me to delete it. But I'm just saying that I'm interested in authenticity, and Damon Winter's article talking about his work in Afghanistan really struck a chord with me. And of course, so I kept doing it. And 20,000 pictures later, I made a book, right? And here are some of the pictures I made. This one is downtown in Battery Park City on the bus. One of the things that I realized about the iPhone that I really liked was wherever I am, I have a camera. And it's also a camera that I've been practicing with and using a lot. And it allows me to just live my life, go to the drugstore, take the bus downtown, and if I see a picture, I take it. And maybe that's why it feels like that, the cliche, the camera that you have is the best camera is the one you have with you. And the iPhone, even though it's so limited in terms of zooming, in terms of light levels, back in the day, you couldn't shoot at night, it would be a horrible out of focus picture. There was something about it that felt very, very comforting, you know. Here's a picture I took in New Orleans when I went to a party and it was the end of the night. And honestly, it's a whole different experience to say, okay, I'm gonna go out shooting today and I'm gonna take my Canon and my Nikon outside, and that's what I'm gonna do. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a completely different way of working, but I wanted to try this and see if I could put together a body of work. And here's a self-portrait I did of me in the middle of a snowstorm, reflected in the window with a giant advertising poster. Here we go. And here's from a bus window going down 9th Avenue. And I was going to a gallery opening in Williamsburg, and I got off the train and I'm walking uptown towards the gallery and I saw this. So what I'm really trying to say to all of you as shooters, there's good pictures all around you. You just have to pay attention and make the effort to make a picture. And the other thing I want to say is you're going to make, if you take 1,000 pictures, 900 of them are going to suck, just like for me. And the other 100 will be pretty good and maybe 10 will be great. And 50% or 60% of your job is learning how to edit your own work and creating a context for the work. Everybody takes a good picture once in a while. Putting 100 of them together that speak to a certain idea or a feeling is what separates amateurs from professionals and amateurs from true artists. To me, the best expression of the art of photography is making a book. Because a book says, here, I've done this, here's 110, 120 images, and this is how they talk to each other. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And I'm just trying to give you an idea of what's in the phone book. This picture I made on the Rue de Rivoli in Paris. And it's one of my favorites in the book. And there's also something else I want to talk about, the optics, there's that word again, of the lens in the iPhone. I don't know if you know anything about it, but the pixels and the size of the lens in the iPhone is tiny. And it took me a long time to be able to put this into words, that the iPhone lens changes the structure of the image. It doesn't look like a 35 millimeter image because it seems like everything is flat. And it reminded me finally of photorealism paintings from the 70s, and that this weird kind of lack of depth of field. And it kind of reminded me of paintings too, you know. And I'm still kind of discover like how to, I think people who are really used to old-fashioned analog photography, when they look at these pictures, they're kind of like, something gets stuck. And they can acknowledge it, that it's an interesting photo, but there's something so different about the way the machine itself or the computer makes the photo. It changes, I don't know. Maybe later you can help me figure out how to express this. This is the Guggenheim in Bilbao. I waited 10 years to see this building, and it really is amazing. It's like a giant sculpture you could see from space. And if you ever get a chance to go there, I really recommend it. And here I am back in New York. You know, I have the whole history of street photography in my head when I'm shooting. And one of the ways I really taught myself was buying photography books back in 1978 and 79 and studying them like it was a textbook. And I got a copy of Robert Frank's The Americans. I got a copy of Harry Callahan's first big color book called Color, and Lee Friedlander's books, and Gary Winogrand's books. And I looked at all the pictures in each of these books and tried to figure out what makes them strong pictures. What makes them hold together? How do they express things? And I think that me studying on my own, just looking at these pictures like it was a Bible, is how I learned how to make pictures. Probably first by trying to imitate them, and then finding my own style, And I think even today, when I go out and shoot, and I'm looking at the world and I see something, it might remind me of something I saw 35 years ago in a book or in a gallery. And I think it's really important for all photographers to have that history in their heads so that they have a structure to build on. I think in any endeavor, not just photography, having a sense of the history of whatever you're working in makes you a better craftsman. And it gives you a whole idea of how language in photography works together, like the language of this mannequin in the subway and the woman's expression and the Statue of Liberty on the poster. And you know what it says there? It says coat drive. That's interesting. I didn't see that when I took the picture, but when you think about it, looking at the photo and you see how all these things works together, you're like building up like layers and layers of meaning. Maybe that's too strong a word when you make a photo. And it's your job as the editor to find the things that you did that were strong things and put them aside somehow. Okay? And here's a picture I made in Santa Monica, California at the end of a day on a really foggy day. And it's really simple, but it has a lot of atmosphere. So I try, it's an interesting thing. I don't try to just repeat myself or go out ahead of time and say, I'm going to make a whole book about this. I try to let the world tell me, at least meet me halfway and give me inspiration. And the reverse is also true, that my job as a photographer is to be open and awake. And it's almost like if you meet the universe halfway, it'll meet you halfway. And that's where the good pictures are, when they meet together. And here's a picture of my self-portrait with a guy sitting in a restaurant. Sometimes I would never think this up, but when you get a picture like this, I'm not trying to be toot my own horn. I'm just saying, when you make a picture like this and it works, it's a surprise for me and it's a surprise for the viewer. Does anybody know who a critic named John Berger is? Has anybody read him? He's one of the probably one of the best writers of art criticism I've ever read. He's really simple. He doesn't speak art speak, and he's written about 30 books. Back in 1981, I went to visit somebody in Mexico, and a woman who was staying in the house with us had literally ran away from the fascists in Bolivia and was staying with a friend in Mexico to sort of have sanctuary for her and her children. And one day she gave me this book called About Looking by John Berger in English, and I read the book while I was there, and it changed my life. And one of the things John Berger said was, a really good photo should surprise the person who made the photo, and if it surprises the shooter, it'll surprise the audience. And that's why being open to what's going on in front of you is really important. And maybe it's a better way of shooting on the street than having an idea beforehand and looking for it. Because when you're surprised and you show the picture to somebody else, they might actually really respond. See? And I also like shooting in the street when there's a lot of weather. And this was that big blizzard a couple of years ago, and I was running some errands in Midtown and it started to snow like crazy, and I had my iPhone with me, and I think I shot 400 or 500 pictures that day, because there's something about the physicality of weather that really gets me interested in making pictures. It's like adding a whole layer of language that's possible to include in a photo. I'm jumping around a little bit, but I was having brunch with friends in Paris, and they were setting up the table for lunch, and I said, well, there's a photo, right? So I'm basically saying all this just to sort of inspire you guys to pay attention when you're living your life. In a year, you might have something interesting, but you have to be consistent about it. And you have to be able to look at what you're doing and learn from the strong pictures, and also learn from the mistakes. Because sometimes the mistakes tell you more than the good ones. And here's a picture that I took in Montmartre in Paris. And I'm really interested in the way language works, where in a picture, these people on the umbrella are talking to the people in real life. And I think I learned that from being in New York back in the old days. In the early 80s, I was shooting Kodachrome in New York. And I realized that I was living in a world where the advertising and the graffiti was talking to the people on the street. And then I started to experiment with how do you juxtapose people in the street with the advertising. And if you think about it, looking back, it was like the beginning of the virtual world that we live in now, where about half the things we experience every day are not physical. And using photography, which is actually the best medium in the world for combining the virtual and the real into one frame, you can say all kinds of things about life by being clever. That's not a great word, but clever about what you put in the frame and what you leave out. And one of the other challenges of the iPhone is to see how much stuff you can get in the frame, like reflections, store windows. And this was one of my first ones that I really liked, where you see the, I'm looking through one window to another window, and there's an empty space in the middle, and these people are around the corner, and the light's coming in through the window, and there's postcards over here, and advertising, and the blue sky. And this is not Photoshop, it's just looking in through a window. And one of the interesting challenges for me as a photographer is how much stuff can I get in the frame without it being total chaos? And it's not easy for me or anybody else. So I'm just going to show you a couple examples of that. Here's another one that I did on 7th Avenue. And you know, the first thing that I'm always attracted to when I make pictures is the light. If the light is good, you're halfway there. Then the second thing is the color. And then the third thing is the content. And the fourth thing, of course, is what I do with all that. So when I see strong end of the day sunlight, it inspires me. And here's my favorite picture that I've ever made with the iPhone, is the Apple store on 14th Street on 9th Avenue. And I shot maybe 100 pictures, and I made this picture. It's not Photoshop, it's just me looking through the window at all the stairs and the glass and the, you know, the building across the street. And it was really a difficult photo to make, in the sense that I had to make 100 of them until I got one that I really thought was good. And I'm really proud of this picture because it, you know, it's almost like, really? You made this with an iPhone? You know? And I was really happy because, you know, it's like challenge. To me, the best part of making pictures is that you challenge yourself all the time. When you go out and shoot every day is an opportunity to push a little harder, look a little deeper inside yourself. And this was one of those days where I felt like I had passed through a little door. And I think the reason that I like photography so much is that it's not really, when you take a picture of the world, you're really not doing that. You're taking a picture of yourself, and you're telling yourself what you're interested in and about who you are. And the thing about photography that's so great is that it's a learning experience, it's a feedback loop for yourself. And it's something you can do by yourself. And if you start building up a rhetoric and a history of photography, I guarantee you it'll start to help you grow as a person. And that's in a way why I started making pictures in the first place. I was a film student at NYU back in the late 70s, early 80s. I was having a lot of mental problems. I ended up in a hospital a couple times. And I was a film student making movies with a lot of people. And I needed something to do by myself that wasn't so stressful, but I felt like was a way of expressing myself. And that's how I became a photographer. And it served me really well ever since, because it's something that nobody can take away from me. It's mine. I made this. And one of the ways you can tell if somebody's truly an artist is how big is the pile of stuff they made by the end of their lives. You know, I'm not saying to say I'm a great artist or not. I'm just saying that one way to tell is if somebody's consistently making work. And you know, I had no idea that any of this stuff was going to see the light of day when I started making it. But there was something intuitively that felt healthy. It felt like a kind of a road to take that would help me as a person learn about who I was. And actually, you get a contact sheet back from the lab back in those days, or you make your own contacts, and you're looking at the quality of your own thought. How clear was I today? How open was I today? What did I see? What made me feel something? There's very few things in the world that can help you do that. And photography now is basically, you could do pictures whenever you want to, and you've given yourself a present every time you take a picture. Think about that. You're giving yourself a present every time you take a picture. Even if it's a bad picture, it's still a present, because you can learn something from it. I was taking this picture where I was in a place called Pays Basque in the, near the French-Spanish border. And honestly, I like to point the iPhone out the window while somebody else is driving, not me. And sometimes something clicks, where you get a good photo. And this is obviously an old church with the cross. And I really did go like that, Here's a picture I took on a cruise in the Caribbean. And here's another one of those pictures where I was trying to get a reflection. An artist made an installation in the Flatiron Building. There's a little art space. And I saw these cups, and it was the end of the day, and the light on I guess it's the Metropolitan Light Building, was just so wonderful. And the thing about practicing making pictures is you start to see not just one thing when you're taking a picture, you see 5 things. And then your intuition learns something, and then you see these things without even consciously thinking about it. When I go out and shoot, I don't think too much. I trust my intuition, I shoot with my body, and it's only afterwards that I step back and use the left brain instead of the right brain and really look at what I've done. But I think the intuition, when you're shooting, one of the things I love about the iPhone is that because it only has this equivalent to like a 35, 40 millimeter lens, that if you want to change the photo, you have to move your body. You can't just stand there over here back across the street and zoom in. You have to walk. And the whole sort of the gestalt of moving your body to get a bit different photo changes the way the photos are made. And it changes the way you take photos. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I got tired of shooting with a Nikon DSLR or a Canon with a 28-200 zoom on it. It just seemed like it wasn't organic enough, I'm really looking to make things come alive. If you think about it, photography itself is a dead thing. It's made by machine. And our job as a photographer is to make this dead thing come alive. How do you do that? To me, that's the most important thing. When you look at the photo 5 years from now, you want to touch somebody, you want to touch yourself, you want to feel like you're expressing something about the life we live. And you're doing it with a machine, that's not so easy. And I think the challenge of turning death into life in this sort of metaphorical way is what makes photography so hard and so interesting at the same time. Here's one of the first pictures I made when I was in South Africa, and a picture I made on the subway. And I want to talk about that too, that one of the great things about the iPhone is that you can look like you're reading an email and take a picture. Because people always say, did the guy beat you up afterwards? No, because you didn't really know. And once in a while I see something interesting on the subway or on the street, and I get away with it, And every time I make a picture of people, I'm always thinking, is this appropriate? Am I stealing from them? Or is this ethical or not? And I think every situation is slightly different, but I can tell you that it comes up for me every time I make a picture like this. And it comes up again when I decide whether I'm going to show it to people or not. I think I go out on the street and I think that I'm going out with a sense of respect for everybody else in the world, and that in a way the world is giving me a gift just to go out and do this. And I'm not interested in criticizing what I see in the world. I'm just trying to show you that there's something transcendent in the ordinary or the mundane, and you can validate and witness the world with a camera. You know, obviously, I really like this picture because of the way the graffiti frames this woman as she's walking by. And this is, you know, a sort of a picture that, you know, harkens back to the decisive moment of Henri Cartier-Bresson, that if this woman was 1/2 foot to the left or the right, it's not a good photo. It's just learning how to listen and look at the same time and get that moment. And here's a self-portrait of me in front of a cafe in Key West. I think self-portraits are a really interesting genre or section of my street photography. Has anybody seen the Vivian Maier book of self-portraits? I mean, that inspires all of us, but people were making pictures before Vivian Maier was discovered. Lee Friedlander is a master at these self-portraits with shadows of himself. And I think I learned a lot from the language that Lee Friedlander developed in using self-portraits, sort of metaphors and stand-ins for himself. And I suggest that you take a look at these things, because all these little pieces of the puzzle are what's going to help you refine your ability as a photographer. You know, one of the reasons I did the iPhone book was to say it's not the camera that takes the pictures. It's your eye that takes the pictures, your feelings that take the pictures. And that's why I wanted to put the book out, to sort of inspire people. You know, go out and make pictures. It doesn't matter if you make them with an Hipstamatic in the 70s, like we all did sometimes. Sure, I mean, there's no substitute in a way for shooting with a 50 megapixel camera, but it doesn't mean that just because of a shot with a 10 megapixel iPhone, it's a bad picture. I'm saying that, you know, there's different purposes for different things. All right. And here's a picture, this is a funny story. This is a picture I made on the street, on Chambers Street, about 4 years ago. And a couple of weeks ago, we had an artist studio tour for Tribeca, and I was one of the artists. And I went to a little cocktail party, and this woman was at the party. I'd never met her before. And it was so great, because she's an artist too. And I said to her, you know, there's a picture of you in my book. And she said, really? And when I showed it to her, she was really happy. And I gave her a book, you know. And it's very rare that when you shoot street photography, you actually meet one of your subjects. And here's the same street, Chambers Street. A woman I haven't met, but I included it in the book. And it just kind of makes you think, wow, New York is such a melting pot. There's people from all over the world. Yeah. And here I am on the subway, just standing there like this and making a photo. And here's some mannequins in the street on a snowstorm. So you know, one of the things that another part of the language of photography is titling pictures. When you're making a book, you have the opportunity to make titles for your pictures. And I couldn't figure out what to call this, and I said, even the well-dressed man needs head and shoulders. And, you know, it adds another level to the book, a little humor, right? Okay. And here is a picture of the snowstorm back in 2010 down on Wall Street. And here's a picture I made in Corsica when I went to dinner at a friend's house. And I was just fascinated by the fact that the inside and the outside were the same f-stop or exposure. And it reminded me of Japan, where they have the inside and the outside be sort of the same when you have a house. And, you know, it doesn't happen very often where you get all of these elements lining up in one picture, and you have a camera and you're prepared to make it. So one of the great things about an iPhone is opportunity comes to people who are prepared, and one way to be prepared is to have taken a lot of pictures with the iPhone and have it with you, and you actually see something that's worth taking a picture of. And here's the cover image from the phone book. You know, I've never seen this this ride before. They put kids in the little ball. It's not a little ball, it's a big ball, and they go out on the ocean like a few feet, and they can spin around inside, and there's a little door, and it's not dangerous. But when you see this, you think, oh my God, is this The Prisoner from the 60s? You know? And you get up from whatever you're doing, you run over there and you take a few pictures. And it just turned out to be the perfect picture for the book because the book has a lot of travel in it. And it's like the shape of the world. And, hopefully some people get that. And here's a picture of of a bait shop on the road to Key West. And what you leave out of a picture sometimes really makes a difference. Obviously, this is on the top of a store, but when you leave out all the other stuff, it becomes a joke. And that's one of the reasons to look at other people's pictures in the past who've really mastered this, is you learn how to tell jokes too. I'm going to stop for a while and talk about The New Yorkers, which was my first book. This one was made mostly in the early 80s on Kodachrome. Does everybody know what Kodachrome was? It was the best film ever made. And I'm really sad that they don't make it anymore. The last time they actually processed Kodachrome was like 2005. It's the most archival film ever made. When I decided to make a book in 2007, these Kodachrome slides were in slide sheets for 30 years. And the color is still there. It's not like Ektachrome that faded. It's Kodachrome, and it's a dyed process. And the Kodachrome slides are brilliant. I love the color, the contrast. So I'm just going to show you a few pictures from this. That's a self-portrait of me in the mirror, in the window, in the white jacket, when I was really thin and had a beard, It's like 1981. And here's a picture of some old men in a coffee shop down in Soho. In 1981, this was like a divey coffee shop, is now Spring Street Natural. And, this is when I was just learning how to make pictures and to get, like I said, the reflections and the interior all at the same time. When you get it right, it's magic. It's not just magic when I show it to people, it's magic when I see it for the first time on film. Let me just show you a couple of more. I was in Staten Island on a Sunday morning, and this woman was sitting in the park. And, the language of juxtaposition is in all the black and white photos we've ever seen most of the time. But you could use the same ideas in color. And here I'm using the red as a way of connecting the dots. Trying to think. What I was trying to do at the beginning when I first studied Robert Frank and Harry Callahan was, Callahan worked in color from what I saw of his work. Robert Frank obviously worked in black and white. And I thought to myself, maybe I can do something that takes Frank's black and white, Callahan's color, and my inner life, my journey through life and my photography, and put something together that sort of builds on that reference. And these are the people, the work that really spoke to me back in that time, and that's what I tried to do, this is a picture where all the elements lined up, like the picture I showed you, the Rue de Rivoli, back in the iPhone book, of the woman with the striped pink and white shirt. So, in a way I could say I haven't done anything new in 30 years. But, every situation is a little different. And this is on Spring Street, and this is in Greenpoint back in 1982. When I made this picture, I was working on a movie as a production still photographer, and we were camped out in a Key Food parking lot, waiting for the weather to be right so all the shots would match. And we'd been working on this movie for about 6 months, and so most of my day was spent waiting and doing nothing. And finally I realized that if I spent my own money and bought an whole separate batch of Kodachrome, I could go out and shoot for half a day in the neighborhood where we were making the movie and make some work for myself. And this was the first, what I consider one of my favorite first early work. And it was actually the first print that anybody ever bought for their house to collect. And here's one of my favorite pictures that I ever made. It's called El Dorado. I took it in Little Italy in 1983. There's a really interesting story about intuition and stuff. The story is that it was a Saturday morning. I was sitting in my apartment with my girlfriend at the time. We're just having breakfast or something, or reading the paper, and I just said to her, I have to go out and shoot for 10 minutes. I had no idea why, but I listened to my little voice, which is actually the most important thing I have, is my little voice. And I went outside and walked around the corner onto Mulberry Street, and I walked up the block towards Spring and Prince, and I must have shot 10 frames. And when I got this one, which was the last one I took that day, I turned around and went home. I have no explanation for why I decided to go out that day except this picture. And this one has lasted 35 years, and I still like it. And I think it's a really strong photo. But the whole idea of sort of hearing a little voice telling you to go out and do something and you paying attention to it and listening is really interesting. And I knew as soon as I got home that I'd made a really strong picture. And that doesn't happen very often. And here's a picture I took in the subway in 1985. One of the things that's interesting about making a book a long time later is that it forces you, of course, to go through everything you ever shot. And you can imagine back in 2007, I'm looking back at work that was shot on Kodachrome in the early 80s. I have 25,000 slides. And obviously I haven't looked at all of them, and I'm looking and looking. It takes me a year to go through everything, and I find this picture that I didn't even know I had. And I was really lucky that I didn't throw things away. You know, so you could say I'm a pack rat when it comes to film. And I was really thrilled when I found this photo. And it's one of those really special pictures in my life now, because to me, this subway that I experienced then is completely gone. And a little side story is that I met a guy who was one of the people who did the graffiti in this subway car when it was parked at the end of the line, and he was 12 years old, and he snuck into the thing, and he said this was the earliest record of his graffiti, and he's really well known now. His name is Chino, and you know, he was thrilled to be able to see his work, and he could look through my book of the New Yorkers, and he knows who every tag was made by, and it's really amazing. Here's a picture I made on Spring Street back in '81. You know, I was feeling a little alienated and lonely at the time, and sometimes pictures reflect back what you're feeling, yeah? And this is '81 also, right near NYU. And this is another picture that I didn't realize was a strong picture till a lot later. And, you know, part of the job of a photographer is recognizing what you did. Sometimes you can't see what you did. It takes a year, it takes 2 years, it takes 5 years to have enough distance to see what you were doing. It's not so simple. I guess it kind of freaks me out when I see people going through their iPhone pictures, delete, 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 you know? That horrifies me. Here's a picture I made on the subway in the 80s. The subway's really beautiful when it's daylight and not fluorescent, right? So I suggest you take a ride on the subway one day, take it outside somewhere into Williamsburg or Queens, and see what happens. Yeah? And this kid was in the car parked with his dad right across the street from my apartment. I still remember them being there. It was 1981, I went outside, there they were, I walked over, took 3 pictures. Thank you. This kid's 50 years old now. Or 40 at least, you know? And here's me walking by the Puck building in 1984, and somebody figured it was a lot easier to throw the garbage out the window than to actually carry it down the stairs. And I was there at the right moment, took the picture. And, you know, when I made the picture, I thought, wow, you know, this plastic they were throwing out the window kind of looks like a harp. And to me, it became a really strong photo. And here's a picture I made in Times Square in the subway in 1980. It's probably the first really strong picture I ever made in color. And when I got home and looked at it, you see the cane that Dudley Moore is holding in the poster. and the cane the old man has. And if anybody remembers the movie, it was called Holy Moses. And the tagline is, he wanted to be Moses, but frankly, he didn't have the right connections. This is virtual reality talking to reality and making something more than the sum. This whole is more than the sum of its parts. That's what photography does really well. And this is another picture from the New Yorkers that I really think is a strong picture, and also that it's an illustration of something that a lot of, like Bresson used to talk about, is basically you look, when you're taking street photography, you find a situation where you can make a strong composition, the light is good, and you wait. You wait for something random to happen. And the random thing in this picture is I make the composition, I see the mannequin in the window over here, and the ledge. This is on the first floor, by the way. It's not jumping off to kill himself. And I have the frame set up just like this, and then this guy runs into the frame to make a shortcut to go around the corner. And because I was prepared, I found a nice frame, and I was not just content to snap one photo and walk away. He jumped in the picture, adding that random thing that's alive to a picture, and then you have a photograph, And I see these kind of formal compositions when I'm walking around, but I know from experience that it's not enough. So you have to have a little bit of, I don't know what the word is, reserve. But I ended up calling the picture Don't Look Now, because the mannequin can't see anything, And, to me, this is when the universe meets you halfway and you get a gift, right? And here's the last picture in the main body of the New Yorkers. That's Basquiat's graffiti, Samo is Dead. I didn't know who Basquiat was then in 1981. I didn't even know what Samo is Dead meant. But I saw the blue jeans and Samo is Dead, and I said, well, there's a photo. And later on, I found that what Samo is Dead means same old thing is dead. And it became like prophecy, because Soho is certainly not the same. New York is not the same. The art world's not the same. And the big surprise for me was that red, white, and blue is the color of the American flag, so maybe this is a new version. And at the end of the New Yorkers, there's an afterword that I wrote, and then I had the opportunity to put a couple of more pictures. The last picture in the book, and the most recent one, I shot in Williamsburg in a puddle in 2005, the last year of Kodachrome. And this is the back cover of the book. I took on the subway platform in Long Island City in 1980. I was really into studying not just photographers, but painters, and I knew about Edward Hopper. I've been inspired by a lot of 20th century painting, like Motherwell and Pollock and de Kooning, and all that stuff is in my head when I'm walking around. Photographs, believe it or not, are not just made in a vacuum. You have a history of what you like, what you've studied, and it also includes movies, and it includes what you see on television. All that stuff is visual imagery made by people who have thought about this, and you can learn from all of it. Let me go back a little bit. One of the reasons why my style looks the way it is because I grew up in a family where my parents owned movie theaters, and when I was a little kid, like 10, 11, 12, I was lucky enough to be able to go to my dad's theater and sit in the back and watch the same movie 40 times. And what happens when you do that is after the first or second time, you know the story pretty well. But you can look at the images over and over and over again, and it gets into your unconscious. I really enjoyed the early 70s films, which were shot in daylight, like Easy Rider and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, by people who were really the best cinematographers in the world, and you're seeing them on an 80-foot screen. There used to be single-screen theaters in the world back in the day, and not little shoe boxes like there are now. And as a 12-year-old, you absorb all this stuff, and you go through high school and you're watching movies all the time. and then it occurs to you maybe 5, 6 years later that you want to be a photographer. All that stuff is inside of you. So, you know, I can say that a lot of what I learned from the cinematographer from back in those days stuck with me. And I'm always conscious of trying to tell a little bit of a story when I make a picture. You know, I'm not doing it consciously, but when I'm editing, maybe I am conscious of the fact that some pictures tell more of a story than others. Now, the reason I put this in here is I'm going to show you some spreads from the phone book and the New Yorkers, just to give you an idea how I think about putting a book together. The real joy for me in photography is making books, because it forces you to deal with all the material and try to decide how the left-hand page and the right-hand page talk to each other. And you have to make at least 60 to 70 of these decisions to make a book of 140 pages. So consider that you're starting out with 10,000 or 20,000 photos, and you're going to edit it down to, let's say, 100, and those 100 have to talk to each other. They have to be in the right sequence in the book so that you can create a narrative, even if it's unconscious, of a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I must say this, the most difficult thing I've ever done is to edit my own books, obviously with a little help, and figure out how the pictures talk to each other. Stanley Kubrick once said that he shot film and so he'd have something to edit. And I feel the same way. I feel like I go out and shoot so that I can bring this stuff back and figure out how it all talks to each other. And you can see why I put these two together. And it works on a lot of levels. It's not just the triangles, it's about high and low, fine art and street art, you know? That's just one way of looking at it. And I'm just going to show you these. You can figure out how I connected the dots. And honestly, here it is, you know, a year after the book came out, and I see different connections between different images. Maybe I would do it a little differently again. But, you know, a book is a book. It's set in stone now. And I'm really happy with the way it turned out, because it's like figuring out a big puzzle. And the puzzle is, how do these pictures work together in a context of a book? One of the things I learned really early on is that a book is a really powerful thing. I've gone to portfolio reviews, and I'm sure some of you have done this, where you meet curators and gallery owners, and you show them a box of prints in a portfolio, and you come back the next year. This is what happened to me. I showed them a box of prints from the New Yorkers, and they go, wow, these are really great. The next year I came back with a book dummy of the same images. Even though the book dummy was not very good, it changed the perception of these people who are professionals in the photography business. And they said, wow, this is a pretty strong body of work. Maybe you should keep doing this. Yeah? They didn't say that when I just showed them the prints. But when I showed them the book, it made a difference. You know? And so I took the skills that I used to make the New Yorkers when I made the phone book. And here's a spread from the New Yorkers. You know, if it's really good spread, it's obvious. It took me a long time to figure this out, but now you see it and you go, oh, this is cool, you know? And so it's really a refining process, right? Yeah. So one of my suggestions to all of you is make a book on one of these print-on-demand book services and get a book back for $30. You don't have to show it to anybody. It's not to sell. It's a book to teach yourself how to make a book. Because, you know, I self-published the New Yorkers. I did a Kickstarter to raise money for it. And basically the whole process of hiring a designer, having all the Kodachrome scanned on a drum scanner. This thing took about 4 years, and let me tell you, it's not cheap. When you self-publish, it could cost you somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 to make 1,000 hardcover copies on an offset press. That's not print on demand. That's the real deal, where they have a press the size of twice this room, and you're paying for the press time and everything. So you buy, it's a really big deal to kind of gamble, because you have no idea if your book's going to sell or not. And one of the ways I hedged my bets was to make lots of dummy books and get them back and figure out what worked, what didn't, even before I hired the designer, who is Patty Fabricant. So that you're basically trying to teach yourself as much as possible about how something works before you spend a lot of money. And one of the ways I taught myself about how the pictures talk to each other is by making dummy books that the printing was not very good, but it did give me information. See? I'm showing you the final result. I'm not showing you, all the things that didn't work. It's like when I discovered the diagonals on the left and the right of these pictures, and I put them together on 2 separate pages, and New Yorkers was like, oh my God, this is great, And one of the ways I figured out how to think about this is you find 1 pair or 2 pairs of pictures that you want to include, and you find the best ones you can possibly make, and then you try to make all the other pairs of pictures in the book as strong as those 2. You're probably never going to get there, but just having a sort of a level of quality in your mind helps you think about all the pages. See? And the connections between the pictures are not always the same 2 ideas. The one on the left obviously is a Sunday painter on Fifth Avenue looking at the arch, and the other one's a self-portrait of me on the subway platform in Long Island City. And now I'm going to go back to the phone book a little bit. Here, I'm using juxtaposition to tell you something. Oh, and the other thing that happened to me when I started shooting with the iPhone, part of me was saying, can I make prints from this stuff? Because honestly, I'm a professional photographer, and if I couldn't print my iPhone pictures and be happy about the prints, I really would have considered stopping, because the end result of making images, part of it, you want it to be something that you can hang on the wall. And so I started making prints on my Epson 3800, and I made a 15 by 15 at home, and I was really thrilled by the quality of the images. So that was a big hurdle to get past. All right. Here's Chambers Street again on a rainy day, and on the bus going home downtown. And this is in Paris. How are we doing on time here? A few minutes, right? Okay. So I'm just going to show you some images. Yeah. This is in Pays Basque in France. Here's, looking out the back of the ship on one of those cruise ships. And here, this is in California at the Griffith Observatory. Yeah. Where Nicholas Ray made Rebel Without a Cause. Anybody remember that? Okay. And here I am at the car wash in Fort Lauderdale. Honestly, I'd say that the most thing that I really enjoy is it keeps me awake when I'm walking around living my life and trying to find things that are possibly a strong picture. And honestly, I make a lot more pictures that I'm showing you. Most of them suck, but some of them are really good. I think one of the things I learned about photography is that photography, making pictures on the street, is really about failure. if you can accept failure as a given and enjoy the process of making the pictures, is actually a really kind of a strong Zen way of looking at what you're doing. And it's not about always shooting for a winner. You know, you're going to make bad pictures, like Babe Ruth hitting home runs. He struck out more than any other baseball player. So think about it that way. There's nothing terrible about making a lot of bad photos. What's terrible is not trying and not showing up. Yeah? This is at the Getty Museum in California. It's one of those pictures where I'm surprised it works. But you know, if you don't try and experiment a little bit, you're not going to kind of keep growing. Yeah. I love the color in this one. I was sitting in a diner in Los Angeles, and I saw these doors, and it just, you know. And here's a self-portrait in a movie theater box office. Yeah. So this was really, like, really talking about my past and a lot of other things in the photo. And, you know, it's all about paying attention and having practice. That's all it really is. I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious, but when I went to print the New Yorkers, I flew into Manitoba in the middle of January in a tiny little plane, and I got to take this picture before we landed at the airport. When I went to the printer, it was minus 45 degrees up there. And I don't know if you've ever experienced what that feels like, but if you're outside for 20 minutes, you can't think, and if you're outside for half an hour, you're dead. And I had to drive 2 hours south of Winnipeg to get to the printer, and even on the interstate with signs and everything, it's like you're in some kind of weird haze. Everything gets disorienting. You don't know really where you are. I overshot the exit by about an hour. And I called up the printer and she said, tell me where you are. And she said, well, if you drive for another 10 minutes, you're going to be in North Dakota. So you better turn around and drive back an hour and then get off the exit. That's how it's disorienting. It's a sunny day, yeah? But while I was driving there, I'd see things that were interesting photos, and I got out of the car, and I couldn't believe how cold it was. I've never experienced anything like this. And I took a picture of these, you know, electricity generating windmills, which are actually one of my favorite things to photograph in the whole world. And I couldn't believe how lucky I was to get to photograph these things. But then I got in the car because it was terrible. And I went to Paragon, I bought all the stuff you're supposed to buy, you know, the boots, the socks, the underwear, the winter coat. Guess what? It doesn't work. Here I am in Mexico City. Yeah. Here's a really good story. I took this picture in Buenos Aires. I was there with my girlfriend at the time. We were, you almost finished?
Yeah, just coming out different.
Okay. Did I do something? No?
Just moved, okay.
Okay. I was at a film festival with my girlfriend at the time in Buenos Aires, and as always, whenever I am, I make pictures with the iPhone. And I was walking down the street and I saw the beautiful green of this storefront. I took this picture. The guy in the picture came out of the store and he says, "Are you trying to steal my store?" And I said, "No, I'm just taking a photo." And he said, "Well, I want you to delete the photo." And I said, first I said no, and I started to walk away, and he wouldn't let me leave. Every time I started to go like this, he would get in front of me. And I kept trying to walk away from him for like 10 minutes. And no matter what I did, he wouldn't let me leave. Then a taxi went by, and I tried to get in the taxi, and he blocked the door, so I couldn't get into the taxi. And he kept saying, you have to delete the photo, delete the photo. So I deleted the photo. I showed him I deleted the photo. And that wasn't good enough. He says, "I want to call the police." So by now, there's a crowd of people, as many people as in this room, standing on the street watching me and this guy have a conversation. And luckily, there was a guy who teaches English teaches English to Argentines speaking Spanish, and he came over and helped me translate what this guy was saying. And it made me feel a lot better because at least there was somebody helping me with this. And then finally the police came, and the guy and the policeman went in the back behind the patrol car, and they had a little conversation. And basically, the police said to him, you know, what you just did was kidnapping. Which it really was, because he was detaining me against my will. And he said it's not illegal to make a photo in the street, right? Obviously, I'm in Argentina, so I'm a little bit feeling more fragile than I would in New York. And basically what happens is the guy comes back to me, and he shakes my hand, and everything's fine now, right? And then I go to have lunch, and I'm looking at the phone, and I'm shaking, literally shaking, because this was really scary. And I'm looking in the camera roll, and I realized that, oh my God, when Hipstamatic makes a photo, it makes one in the Hipstamatic app, and the other one is saved in the camera roll. And this is my revenge. I had the photo all along, and I didn't even know it. And here it is, 4 years later, I put the photo in the book. What can I say? And I wrote a whole long story about it on Facebook because I think it was an interesting discussion about what's it like to shoot on the street, what happens when something happens, you know, the ethics of all that. It was a really great thing to write the story. It was a way of getting over the shock of it and getting it out of my system. So it wouldn't have, you know, honestly, after this thing happened, I didn't feel like shooting for a couple of days because it is scary. And I had to force myself to go out, like get back on the horse, so to speak, and just keep doing it. And writing about it was a good thing for me. It helped me let go of it and then go back to making pictures. And here's another picture from Buenos Aires that I always like because, you know, it expresses some emotion about loneliness and isolation. And here's there's a really colorful part of Buenos Aires where everything is painted these amazing colors. Sometimes it's really easy to make a photo. And here's a picture from the New York City subway. I'm going to jump around a little bit. This is a picture of a bar that was closing in Manhattan. And a cowboy on the subway. Sometimes the simplest things just make interesting photos just because of the mood and the color and the composition. And this is in a church. And this is in a storefront in Paris. Okay, I'm going to go a little faster now because I want to show you something, one more thing. Okay. I wanted to show you just a little taste of what I'm working on now. About 10 years ago, I lived on a farm in Georgia. It was about an hour south of Atlanta. And I was there on and off for about 2-3 years. And there's really not much to do down there. And the way I coped with it was I made pictures on color negative and had it developed at the drugstore. I mean, the local 1-hour photo. And when I was editing the pictures, I realized that from my point of view, Georgia was really just green and blue. A lot of grass, a lot of sky, and that it wasn't that interesting. But when I took the color negative and made it into black and white using Adobe Lightroom, just as a way to start, I realized that I might have a strong body of work that would look consistent. So I just want to show you a little bit of what I'm thinking about could be my next book. Yeah. I gave the sepia tone to it in Lightroom, but originally the pictures were a color negative. Yeah. Yeah. And, it was interesting for me to go to Georgia because in some ways Georgia is more different than Europe to someone from New York. And, one of the good things about being an outsider in a situation is you have a different point of view than the people who live there, and you can see things. Yeah. And I was able to exercise a different muscle. It's fun to shoot landscapes for a change. It's fun to think about space in a different way. Yeah. No, this is all with 35 millimeter film on a Nikon FM2. And sometimes I actually used an Olympus XA, if anybody remembers what that was. It's a little camera this big, held the 35 millimeter roll, and it had a rangefinder viewfinder. So you could actually make a sharp picture, and the pictures were beautiful. Yeah. This is the lighthouse in Georgia and Tybee. So, I mean, it's nice that I'm able to work on this now. I find it really interesting for me to, one of the best things about being a photographer is that you get to go back in the past and look at a body of work you weren't able to deal with or you didn't have time for, and find that maybe there's something significant there. We'll see, but I wanted to start to show it a little bit just to see how it feels. Yeah. This is just the beginning of a process. I'm starting to scan all the negatives, deciding which ones are going to be in a body of work and which aren't. And once I realized that they were going to be in black and white, and I'm sure of that, I actually made them sepia because I wanted to make 8.5 by 11 prints. And a sepia print on a color printer is actually going to look a little better than a black and white print, because when you make a clear black and white print, usually there's a tint to it and you're not controlling it. So this is just an exercise, the beginning of a process. Okay? And here's the book covers again. I think that's it. Yeah. Okay.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.